Welcome back. This is Morning Express on the second day of May 2016. It is now just about going to 10 minutes to 7 right here, Kenyan time. Let's look at the dailies this morning, starting off with the Standard, where the headlines is Huruma death hits 21. Of course, this is after the tragic incident that happened after the torrential rain started hitting us on Thursday, but this happened on Friday evening, and the death toll currently is at 21. Earlier in the day, yesterday, 4 bodies were pulled out of the rubble of the collapsed building. And of course, questions being raised as to why this should continue happening. It's not the first time it's happening. We did have a prediction of heavy rain that was coming. However, the county government coming out, of course, to blame each other. We have the building and civil engineering units and the county governments all throwing blame at each other. So, of course, at the end of the day, lives have been lost, property has been destroyed, and the question is, are we going to have a stop once and for all to this? Number 2, another victim injured when the building collapsed died at Kenyatta Hospital. And 3, according to this article in the Standard, the last night 4 more bodies were retrieved from the collapsed building, taking the toll to 21. And of course, this is a very, very, very sad incident taking place. Then, still on the front page of the Standard, the nation receives former First Lady. On the cloudy and chilly morning, a plane carrying the body of former First Lady Lucy Kibaki touched down at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport at 5:20 a.m. That was yesterday. It was an emotional scene as the casket draped in the Kenyan flag was removed from the belly of the Kenya Airways as the 3-day national mourning began. So, of course, that is another story that we are following up very closely for you, and ensuring you that we give you all the details that we receive. We do know that the funeral is going to be taking place in Othaya. It is going to be a private funeral, but of course, details will be given as we receive them. On to page 2. An interesting scenario here, and this is highlighting a church where sinners go through hell, literally. And you do know that normally, or rather according to the teachings, we do know that, hell is one that you experience after you have lived your life. But this church, apparently you go through hell literally, physically. And it's because the leader, who is one lady, literally punishes those who are caught to be on the wrong side of what she would call the higher law. And this is Mary Sinaida Akatsa. And if you're caught on the wrong side, you receive a slap. So you experience your hell with immediate effect. Very interesting right there. Still looking at some of the stories in the Standard, we have that full story of the death toll rising now to 21, as we have 65 still missing. On page 6, we have a pictorial and short story there of emotions running high as Mama Lucy Kibaki's body lands at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Moving on now to page 8. Let's look at Raila's terms to Uhuru over IEBC. And the opposition leader, we do know that ODM and CORD have been very vocal when it comes to IEBC and the removal of the commissioners. And there was supposed to be staging some demonstrations resuming tomorrow, but because of the 3 days of mourning of the former First Lady Lucy Kibaki, that was postponed to a later time. But of course, the CORD coalition still very vocal and very strong to ensure that they have that push. And the CORD leader is demanding minimum electoral reforms, including reducing the number of IEBC commissioners and reviewing the reporting of presidential election results for the opposition to participate in next year's general elections. They've been very solid on saying that they will not recant on that. We have proposed, this is according to the opposition leader, that IEBC chair will not be a full fixed term, but rotational every 1 or 2 years to guard against the chair imposing himself or herself on the rest of the commission by building clout. So, of course, that is a debate that we're waiting to see how it's going to go once we resume normalcy, and that will be from Wednesday, Thursday going forward. On to page 10. Yesterday was Labor Day, and workers accuse employers' body of denying them annual increment. Of course, this is normally a time in the country where laborers and workers look forward to the minimum wage being pushed a little bit higher, but it's been going up for the last few years despite the situation of the economy. And of course, those who are employers would feel that it can get to a point where it would be difficult to keep up with it. However, of course, the workers were anticipating and looking forward to a time where that would still be raised. But KOTU had presented a proposal to have 40% minimum wage increase for the lowest paid workers in the country. That, of course, did not happen. And addressing workers yesterday to mark the International Labor Day celebrations at Uhuru Park, Nairobi, Atwoli said the Salaries and Remunerations Commission, SRC, should be scrapped since it had failed to advise government accordingly. There's a full detail of that particular story. We also do know that politicians took advantage of having workers gathered together at Uhuru Park, although there were not that many, but of course they took advantage to have their political sentiments aired and also try to gain some political mileage. And of course the main and big subject at this point in time being the IEBC. A rather interesting story that is likely to provoke debate is on page 11. And outrage as judge sets free defiler because girl was willing. Now, according to this story, a man serving 20 years sentence for defiling a 13-year-old girl in 2012 has been set free. Now, according to the High Court judge, Chitambwe, he says that the 13-year-old, after investigation, and this is after the accused made an appeal, apparently was having intercourse with him. It was consensual. So as a result, he decided to release the man. And his argument, according to this Supreme Court judge, or rather according to this High Court judge, he says that if this case continues as it was and this man is jailed, then you would have incidences of minors who would agree to sex, then after that put their accusers, or if they disagree with those who they had intercourse with, then they would basically run to the court, run to the law and have them arrested. So as a result, he decided to release this man despite having been jailed previously for 20 years with an early judgment. So according to him, he says that evidence shows that the girl behaved like an adult and willfully left her parents' home and went to their appellant house purposely to have intercourse with him. So of course that is one that is likely to raise a lot of debate with the authorities and with parents and with all sorts. Finally, looking at, Monday we have a pull-out magazine in the Standard, which is the Crazy Monday. And there's an interesting picture there. And it says, when midlife crisis hits your man. And the picture that is there just literally describes that very, very effectively. So when midlife crisis hits your man, some of the things that you should be looking out for and possibly remedies. And of course, some of the pictures in that particular magazine literally just, let me say, buy the Standard, get yourself a copy of the Standard and see for yourself, because I think it is just funny when you look at it. But anyway, there you go. Let's now move on to the Daily Nation this morning, where the headlines is Mama Lucy arrives for sad final journey. And this, of course, is as the country begins the 3-day mourning, where Uhuru and Ruto among top leaders on hand to receive Mrs. Kibaki's body at the comfort the former first family as government release funeral programs. And that, of course, was yesterday. There's also details and pictures on page 2 and 3 of the Nation. Moving on to page 4, we have KOTU that differed with employer's body on formula for pay rise. Again, this is as there was an expectation from workers that there would be an increase in the minimum wage, but that was not seeing the light of day. And in a public display of anger, Central Organization of Trade Union Court accused the Federation of Kenya Employers and Kenya Private Sector Alliance, KEPSA, of misadvising the government on how much workers should be paid. We also have Mr. Atwoli's beef was the employers who are insisting on paying workers based on productivity when there was no formula in place to measure it. So, of course, the question is, if you're going to have employees paid based on their productivity, then you would expect a formula to find or to work out how productivity is going to be measured. Monthly wage has stagnated since 2010, a study reveals, and 97% need a pay rise. Given the economy, given the kind of hard times that we're in today, apparently 97% need a pay rise. Now, one of the things we'd like to discuss this morning from 7 o'clock is just basically that. When it comes to labor, when it comes to work, it looks like we're forever chasing an endless tail. You know, like a dog chasing its own tail. It goes faster. The faster you move, the faster the tail moves. And the reason we say this is because there is a coining of the word that we're trying to make ends meet. And those ends never seem to meet. But the question is, will we ever get to a point where you are satisfied with what you do for a living? Is satisfaction brought about by how much you're paid? That's a question we'll be asking this morning. Moving on to page 8. Ukambani leaders reject Mutua's visit to State House. Now remember, last week, Governor for Machakos, Mutua, was with some Kamba leaders going to see the president, and a section of leaders from Ukambani have dismissed the visit to State House last week because they feel like this is Ukambani trying to position itself for CAM 2017, possibly to be part of the Jubilee coalition. But there are some leaders who have said that's not going to happen. According to Mutua, even as we spoke to him as he was person of interest on Tuesday, he said that he's merely taking advantage and trying to see whether the government will keep their promises regarding Ukambani to make sure that development projects that had been promised by the government are actually realized. His visit, of course, was not taken very positively by some of the leaders of Ukambani. Page 9. Remember, on Saturday we had a historic event taking place, and that was the burning of tons and tons of animal tusk, namely the giant, which is the elephant, and rhino. But China sets its record straight on poaching, and the Chinese government have used the Summit of Wildlife Poaching and Ivory burning in Kenya to defend its record in fighting poaching. President Xi Jinping told participants in Nanyuki that his government is determined to change the laws and impose stiffer punishment on ivory smugglers. We take a strong stand against illegal wildlife trade, he said. So, of course, like they say, the proof is in the pudding, and we'll wait to see whether that really will happen. And of course, there's also focus on Kenya to find out whether burning of ivory really is a solution or it is just PR exercise. According to an article in one of the dailies, according to the opposition leader, apparently they feel that that is just a PR exercise, and we need to do much more. Page 12. Hundreds displaced as floods wreak havoc. Floods have displaced at least 6,000 people in Tebere as heavy rains continued pounding Kirinyaga County. Local MCA Gadson Mushina said many houses have been submerged, and some residents have been forced to flee the area. Most of those affected from Keamanyeki, Diabo, Kembu, and of course it's named there. And of course there's still an alert out there as to some of the areas that we're expecting to be flooded. We also do know that there is an alert that was sent out, of course, to those in Nairobi, highlighting some of the flood-prone areas, and in case of a downpour, you are warned to avoid those areas because they are likely to flood, and we have seen that those floods can actually be very, very dangerous, especially when we have the flash floods. Finally, let's look at the Star, where the headlines is CORD wants Uhuru to nod, or rather, CORD wants Uhuru nod to sack IEBC. And before we move on from the front page of the Star, picture speaks 1,000 words, and that is military officers receiving Mama Lucy Kibaki's casket at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And of course, like we mentioned, we are waiting for details as we receive them as a country, as we continue to mourn the death of the former First Lady. Now to that top story, CORD wanting Uhuru to nod and send home IEBC chiefs. And according to the opposition principals, Kalonzo Musyoka, he says that no one has asked Uhuru to sack commissioners because that is not his responsibility, but he can add his voice for this country, rather if he cares for this country, and we cannot afford to have another stolen election because Kenyans will not accept. So the opposition, they are saying that their expectation is not necessarily for Uhuru Kenyatta to sack IEBC officers because constitutionally that is not possible. He has no power to do that. We do know that the power, the Constitution has basically handed the power to the people, and as a result, there is a procedure to have the IEBC commissioners removed because they enjoy what we'd call privilege of tenure, which is protected constitutionally. So the process, one of the things that they need to do is through the National Assembly to table this in Parliament, and after there is found reason for them to be removed, a tribunal would be formed, and then of course assented to the president finally for him to sign. So of course for them, the opposition saying that we are not asking for the president to sack them directly, rather we are asking whether he can weigh in, and let's hear his voice. What is his take as to whether they should be in office or not? And city residents told to avoid flooded areas, and this is for obvious reasons, as we continue, of course, to mourn the death of so far 21 people, and we have many others that are missing. And of course, we are praying for the families, and as a country, we need to ensure that we do much, much, much more to see whether this can be done. I don't want to preempt it, but hopefully tomorrow on Person of Interest, we should have somebody who can weigh in and give us solutions as to what we should be expecting as the residents of this country. Well, that's where we're going to wind up our newspaper review this morning. Do stay with us right here on Morning Express. When we do come back today, like I mentioned earlier, the way it is, it's going to be a little bit different. Our usual panel today are taking a break, given that it's a holiday. Some of them sometimes, like Omar Hassan, have to sacrifice